Follow up on this affidavit from Warren Kinsella, the Liberal, about his sworn affidavit that there are serious talks going on to merge the Libs and the NDP. But for now, I want to turn to another one of the country's bitter and long-running disputes. This is an interprovincial one. The Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador was in Ottawa today. He was delivering what became a blistering speech, claiming that Quebec's, and I'm using his words, greed and arrogance on energy disputes is milking Newfoundland dry. At the same time, his province is proceeding unabated and unrepentant with the deepest oil well drilling project in history, even as the rest of the country is growing a little more concerned, or a lot more concerned, as the disaster in the Gulf of Mexico unfolds. Premier Danny Williams joins me in studio. Good to see you.
Nice to be here.
We haven't talked since your health has gotten better. Good to see you back.
Yeah, I feel good. Everything's great.
Good stuff. And you seem to got not just your heart going, but your passion's going today. Oh. And you got some hearts in Quebec, some blood pressure going up there, because you had some really strong words about this ongoing dispute over the deal between Newfoundland, Labrador, and Quebec. Just give me the summary of the speech today.
Well, I guess I just laid out the facts. The situation is we've applied to the regime to get access through Quebec, a regulatory process, supposed to be a fair, independent process. They came back after 4 years of stalling us and delaying us and gave the most blatantly biased decision that I've seen in 40 years of being a lawyer. I haven't practiced law for 40 years. I've practiced for 30. Unbelievable. Ignoring facts, suppressing evidence that was relevant, reversing previous decisions, ignoring principles of administrative law and common law. I've never seen anything like it, but it was deliberately to stop us, delay us, and prevent us from going ahead with the project.
Is this becoming personal? Let me just show our audience a part of your speech today, it's just so they get a sense of what you said. Quote, Canada has set 2020 reduction target for emissions, which will be difficult to fulfill, and the Quebec government has the gall to embarrass and criticize Canada in Copenhagen during the international conference for not dealing with climate change, while at home its policies deliberately block major green solutions. You're talking about the development of the Lower Churchill, of course, which Labrador and Newfoundland want to do. You also spoke, just for the record, about Quebec getting $17 billion annually in federal transfers and asked what Quebec is doing with all the revenue and the fact they get tax breaks. So is this personal with Quebec?
Well, it's not personal. It's personal to Newfoundland and Labrador. I'm concerned about my province. I mean, what's basically happening here is here they are internationally. They're the champion of climate change. And they're about everything that's good and wholesome when it comes to, to green gas.
Well, they've got hydroelectric, and they say that.
Sure, but what they're trying to do is stop our project, which happens to be the best clean, green energy project in all of North America. In addition, on a national basis, they're blocking a national energy grid, which means that power in Ontario and power in Manitoba and the 11,000 megawatts that's in the Northwest Territories can't be put into the national grid, can't be used in Canada to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, for economic advantage, to create jobs, for example, in Ontario. If the Lower Churchill went ahead, there would be thousands of jobs in Ontario because we would require steel and cement and fuel and technology, and that's just not happening. So when Quebec stops Newfoundland and Labrador from doing the Lower Churchill, it affects the maritime provinces, and it affects Quebec, and it also affects Ontario.
They say, the argument is, Danny Williams likes to say that, but look, why don't we just cut a deal with Danny Williams? We have the experience. They have to spend billions of dollars on long transmission lines. Let us do it. We'll give you a piece of the action. End of the story. You're going to blow your brains out doing it.
We built the Upper Churchill. We did the engineering, the manpower. We run it. We own it. We operate it. The only problem is we don't get the profit from it. 2 years ago, Quebec took $2.3 billion. Newfoundland's return was $50 million. The loss to our province on a per capita basis, we translate that into Ontario. Per capita, that would be the equivalent of Ontario losing $38 billion annually to Quebec. Now, that's the kind of inequity that's going on.
But that's the Upper Churchill. But now, I mean, I understand the long-standing anguish about that. But going forward, is there not a better solution than this kind of...
Right now, Newfoundland and Labrador is in a good, strong economic and fiscal position. We paid down our debt. We knocked off 1/3 of our debt in the last 4 years. So we're positioning ourselves to do this project ourselves. We wouldn't mind partnering with Quebec. We don't mind paying Quebec rentals because we're prepared to pay a fair rental. We don't mind paying Quebec for upgrades to its transmission facility. But this is our project, and we are going to do it ourselves, with or without Quebec. There's an opportunity here for Quebec to get some benefits by using their transmission facilities. But what Quebec wants to do is stop us in our tracks so that they have the dominant market, that there's an anti-competitive attitude in Quebec which says it's going to be our power and it's going to be our price power as a result of what they've done to tie up the interconnections in Ontario. They actually buy power from Ontario at off-peak times, so they buy it cheap. store water in their reservoirs, they use that power, and then they sell it back to Ontario for 4 times that price when Ontario needs it in peak times. So, what's going on across the nation as a result of Quebec's market dominance and anti-competitive behavior is sad, and it needs to end.
But, you talk about it having tax breaks for the best child care programs in the country, the lowest tuitions for post-secondary. It seems to me you're saying, look, you guys are basically subsidizing the best stuff for your citizens at the expense of the rest of the Canadians.
I've gone further than that. I said the tail is wagging the dog. I talked today about the political strangulation that's going on in this country. Because Quebec has basically surrounded Ottawa through its federal ministers, French ministers, its provincial government, and the Bloc Québécois, they have the federal government strangled. So as a result, whatever their demands are, they get. So you have a situation here whereby they're taking exorbitant profits from Newfoundland and Labrador. They're preventing Ontario and the Atlantic provinces from getting an economic advantage and moving ahead economically. And at the same time, turning around and going back to those same provinces like Ontario and saying, would you mind giving me $17 billion a year so I can lower my taxes, so I can subsidize my electricity rates to the tune of $7 billion? Electricity rates in Quebec are 40% lower than Toronto, Calgary, Moncton, and Halifax.
But listen to me, that's hot stuff. When you're saying the French ministers in Ottawa,
Absolutely.
are working on behalf of Quebec, not on behalf of the rest of Canada?
Absolutely. This is where you get the perfect political trifecta.
Like who? I mean, I understand the Bloc, but you're talking about federal ministers?
Absolutely. The federal government, any federal government, whether it happens to be a Conservative government or a Liberal government, the Quebec interests are represented by those federal ministers. If they can't get the job done, the Quebec provincial government steps in and exerts its pressure. If they can't get the job done, the Bloc Québécois, who have the balance of power in Canada, then use their own
Premier,
interests.
every MP represents the region and the riding. We get that, but you seem to be suggesting there's something deeper, that all politicians from Quebec are simply, essentially, Quebec first at the expense of the rest of the country. Do you really believe that?
I actually believe that. Yeah, I'm not suggesting that. I'm actually saying it. What I'm saying to you is that as a result of the political strategy which Quebec has, which is a smart political strategy, but it's to the detriment of the rest of Canada. Everybody knows that Quebec gets preferential treatment in this country. Well,
But so when you're dealing with a Quebec minister, Christian Paradis, I mean, these are ministers that are working in a federal party.
I happen to be a premier of a province that I would like to think is an equal province in a Canadian federation. We like to see all the provinces do well, but we do not like to see one province suppress us on the one side, prevent us from economic growth, subsequently also preventing other provinces from economic growth, and at the same time taking exorbitant profits from us on the Upper Churchill, which is a contract that's already been done, and they're not prepared to readjust.
But would you say the same thing about, I don't know, ministers from Ontario / ministers from Alberta, that they're only working for Alberta or Ontario or BC, or is it specifically Quebec?
No, every minister and every representative from every province looks out for their own province's interests. But what I'm saying to you is, as a result of the perfect triangle that's been created by Quebec, the combination of the Bloc and or the provincial government and or the Quebec federal ministers protects Quebec's interests completely, and often to the detriment of Canada, because other provinces have to pay a price. If Quebec gets an unfair advantage, then for every gain there has to be a loss somewhere along the way. I'm saying in this particular situation, our province is losing as a result of what's going on.
Can the Prime Minister do something about that?
No, this is not about, I'm not here to pitch the federal government to go after Quebec. I'm here to tell...
Well, you're in Ottawa.
Yeah, no, but I'm here to tell Canadians, here's the inequity that's going on in Newfoundland and Labrador. Here's what's wrong with a province preventing another province from doing a very, very good project that's good for the rest of the country.
If Premier Charest was across the table from you, what would you say to him right now?
I would say exactly the same thing. Jean Charest and I, happen to be friends from way back. We go back a long time in the Progressive Conservative Party. He represents his province to the best of his ability, and I represent mine, and I respect that. However, I'm not going to allow Newfoundland and Labrador to be pushed around by Quebec any longer. Simple as that.
All right.